Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May SPIT Committee meeting, Strategic Plan, Technology, and Transportation. Looking for an approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the April meeting?
Yes, motion.
Yeah, motion to approve or second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Mr. Parker, technology update, please.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate getting to give you the end of year. I've done this every year to give you an end of year wrap up of kind of the projects and where we are. So part of that is I gave you a roadmap in your packets that allows you to see from 2017 to 2023 where we're headed to and the accomplishments that we've obtained. Everything marked in red in that has been completed. And we're actually ahead by bringing in the 3 through 5 Chromebooks this next year, where I had planned on this next year, or the following year to do it. We're actually 1 year ahead. So those accomplishments are in there, and you can review those. I'm not going to read them and go over all of them, but they're in there for your packets for your review to allow you to see those. One of the things I did want to show was when I get to cybersecurity, because as a district, there's been increased activity by cyber criminals. There always is. That they never rest, even when we go to a virtual environment. Just since February, there's been, according to SonicWall, there's been 187 million ransomware attacks. And this is where they exploit your servers and lock them down, and you have to pay money. They call it Bitcoins, but it's money to get back your data and information. So as a district, we put in several safeguards in place. One of them is moving to that A5 security with Microsoft. And we've done intrusion ratings. So one of the best practices is to have third-party companies try to get into your servers, give you ratings, just like you would a credit score. You would get an intrusion rating. And I wanted to share part of my screen to let you see what the looks like. So here is one of them. This is from a company called BitSite. They are the top rated company that gives you a rating to tell you how well you've done. And they do a third party assessment. They tell you where you're proficient, where you need to improve in, and then they give you a score. And they're one of the, they actually perform intrusion tests for 7 of the top 10 cybersecurity agencies out there. So as part of the state DPI service, this was provided to the districts, and you could assess your rating. So you can see that we were rated at 760 in January, went to 770. They rated Union County Public Schools in the top 10% in the nation, and that includes universities, colleges, and all K-12 institutions. So we ranked in the top 10%, which is good. It's not where I want to be. I want to be in the top 2%. So there's room to improve. Even though we've made great strides and obtained this level, I want to get even better. Just to give you the 3 areas that we need to improve in is spam propagation. That's over here where they had the spam, and we rated below that because we weren't on that A5 Microsoft security. This is an example of this is when you get an email in and you enter your credentials into a phishing email. You put in your username and your password. Then they use your email to blast out to all of your contacts. So we put in Spam Titan, which helped us some, but it wasn't as good a tool as what we need. So the new A5 was with Microsoft will help this because they call it online threat protection. It stops the cybersecurity. It helps us with that propagation. They also call it's a sender policy framework, the SPF, which is on the bottom right. That's really looking at the person's username and their domain and seeing where they exist and do the 2 match. You know, does Union County Public Schools match our domain registered name? So those are 2 areas that we're we will improve in when we move over to the new Microsoft platform, which is really cool. The other one is I wanted to show you was here. This just gives you the trends of the attacks and what happens to them and how many we've had. And SonicWall gives us this data and collects it across the nation from all industries. This is public and private. There's 6 areas that we're working in right now. We assess the inventory. That's where you look at the servers. You give the intrusion testing. We do response testing. We do our reviews, and then we test it again. But just so you see these areas, and within the next slides are actually our plan as our roadmap for the cybersecurity, a high-level roadmap. And I included that in the share for you as board members to see and review, but it goes through our district plan. It covers our network and it covers our infrastructure with our servers. So I'm not going to get into all the details here, but you're welcome to look at it and see what you want from there. Also included in your packets was our accomplishments. So I put the 20 accomplishments that we've had this year. They've ranked everywhere from 528 classrooms have been updated with the new projection devices at the beginning of this year, to we put out 5,500 more 1 million wireless hotspots for our students for connectivity. And that paid dividends, because we went into a virtual instruction later on, and we did not know we were going to head there, but we were at least prepared somewhat. That brings us to 6,538 devices in our district. So that gives that many students the opportunity to have connectivity back in when they are in a remote environment, and the students keep it until they graduate. Not going through all of them, but we did move K-3 schools off of carbon paper into an electronic report cards now, so parents can see those at home. And we also put in an electronic registration with Scribbles and expanded that platform. And the first day we had 27 electronic registrations from kindergarten on day 1. So hopefully that trend continues, and parents have an ease of registering their students and getting online with them. We are in a pilot phase right now in kindergarten until June 15th, and then we're bringing in all grade levels. So that's called ScribSoft. It's just part of an extension of Scribbles, our current vendor. So it allows us to do it. The rest of the accomplishments are in there. You're welcome to look at them and see all of them that have been completed. The last piece I want to talk to you about is the cybersecurity. The ransomware has locked down many school districts, and if you look around the nation, or even you can Google it, they're after school districts because typically they don't have security departments or security instructors, and they're after them, and they're actually taking over. And once they get into your district resources, they obtain usernames, social security numbers, they obtain your data, your financial information, because that's on servers. And so we're protecting our students, our staff, and our resources by putting all of these steps in place and ensuring that we're now with the A5 Microsoft level of education. But that's really the brief summary, and I don't know if you have any questions, but that just kind of gave you a lot of information in a hurry. But all of the details are up in the slides if you need to see more information in them.
Thanks, Mr. Parker.
job.
I appreciate that update. Yeah, it's an impressive list when you finally get to see it on paper, everything that's been done. So excellent job.
Thank you.
Board, any other comments or questions for Mr. Parker?
No, just want to say, Jay, you're doing a great job, you and your team. To be a year ahead or whatever, I know you've got a lot of goals on where you want to get our systems to be, but just continue to be impressed with you and your team.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. It's a team effort. We have a great leadership team. We work well together, and we always are looking for ways to improve. You never want to sit in one place long, because if you do, you'll get left behind. So we're constantly moving forward, trying to improve services for our community and our students and give them the best experience possible in Union County Public Schools. But thank you.
All right. If nothing else from Mr. Parker, we'll move on to a transportation update. I believe Mr. Denton, you're going to provide.
Yes, sir, I am. Good morning. I have one request. Maybe you could put me in front of Jay next time because he's
He always raises the bar.
yeah, congratulations to Jay and his folks. I mean, that's fantastic. You mentioned being in the top 10%. That's a goal we would have as well, to transport our kids in the very best way we can. So with that, good morning, everyone. We've been working quite diligently over the past, I guess I came March 16th. We've taken the time to be able to evaluate where we think we are. One of the things that is true about transportation and much of the school business is we're very process heavy. And so we've been working to review a lot of our processes. Have we been running school from March 16th to now? We've not been able to make near the process and reviewing progress and reviewing our processes that we've made. So I'm very pleased with where we are. I don't think you can hold staff accountable for excellent transportation service unless you have good processes in place. And so we're trying to make sure that we get all that documentation satisfied, some training provided for our people, and that way when we do start back up, we've got the framework. And we had good framework in place, don't get me wrong, but we did want to make sure we reviewed all of those and we shored up some things where they needed attention. So very, very pleased with that. One of the couple items that are very critical to what I think we're getting ready to operate in. And I think we're preparing for two different environments. One would be a normal return to school, which we all sort of know is not going to happen right away. But we have to prepare for that because at some point in time, we will return to a more normalized state. So we have to have two scenarios for transportation to return. The other one, we don't yet have a lot of parameters. So we're anxiously awaiting some guidance from the state. We're working on a committee with them to be able to provide some guidance for the entire state on how we might run transportation when we start back up. And that runs the gamut from how many school bus seats can be used, how do we social distance on the bus, what are the cleaning protocols, what does it look like for gauging how many students will ride, do we have a process for application with that? There's just a lot of questions that we have to go through and analyze. And I'm kind of famous for telling my staff we've got some time, but we don't have a lot of time right now. So I'm getting a little bit anxious that we need to go ahead and be making some decisions about where we're going with this. Part of that process of looking at returning to a normalized environment is double runs in our schools. I don't like double runs as a practice. However, when we ended the school year this year on March 16th or March 14th, we were actually using double runs whether we wanted to or not because we had such a shortage of school bus drivers. We were basically 18 drivers short when I got here, and so we were doubling buses on a daily basis whether schools really enjoyed that part of it or not. Basically, when you double run impromptu like we were doing, here comes the bus app doesn't work. We heard that loud and clear from our principals. I've talked with almost all of our principals now. I think I may have one or two left. Just to get feedback on how operations were going last year. And a couple things they brought up were here comes the bus app didn't work sometimes and I can't get people in the office. And so by standardizing and by planning our double runs, we'll be able to better communicate with parents up front on what that service looks like. Here comes the bus app will work much better because it's now a planned, programmed set of circumstances versus having to make the change on the fly every day and doubling something different from day to day. So we've identified 14 buses that we can actually park through performing doubles this coming school year. Again, if we return to school in our normalized environment, that would cut our bus driver shortage from 18 down to 4, which would obviously help our staff being in the office quite more frequently. We want to make sure that our staff's in the office. And it's like I told our principals, I'd love to take your phone call and I'd love to answer your question, but I don't have the information to give you. All I have is an exception report that may or may not have been filled out by a person who was in the office. And sometimes those folks were driving buses. So we're not able to get the information to you that you need. We're not able to answer parent phone calls because I don't have the information in the main office. We want to try to get the information provided from our remote locations so that information is provided accurately, very quickly, and our service level rises. So that's something that we've been focusing on quite a bit. The feedback we got from principals overwhelmingly was that yes, if we have to do doubles, we'll support you on it. And so I'm very, very hopeful that we can roll out doubles when we start school back. again, we were thinking from a normalized environment. So understand that we've got to figure out what this thing looks like from a COVID-19 perspective. The other thing that we're trying to work on behind the scenes a little bit, as all of you know, we're moving into a transportation facility now in July because there was an extension to the contract. And we're going to have 2 of our transportation divisions areas that will be moving into that facility. Sun Valley and Monroe currently are planned to move into that facility. One of the things we're playing with or toying with or experimenting with, and I'm using it from experience. This was really not an experiment from me. I'm using my experience to do this with. Wish I'd had time to watch the actual operations flow. We've not run a single day since I've been here. But based on my experience, I can tell you that trying to run 8 divisions with 3 people in each division is very, very difficult to do because you don't have you're covering an office from 5:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. There's just not enough resource in that office to have someone there all the time. And I think that's part of the frustration that principals are experiencing is when they call that there's nobody there because folks are gone. So what I'm thinking about is doing a couple of things. One, consolidating some of our offices, and the first office I would consolidate would be Monroe Sun Valley because they'll be right across the hall from each other in our new facility. I think that provides then more resource for at least one person to be in the office to field phone calls and respond to issues and concerns for the entire span of our operating day, which is probably a little bit prior to 5:30 in the morning and spans till 6 or 6:30 at night when the last bus gets back. So I'm really interested in, and I've seen this work before, otherwise I would not be even talking about it. I've tried this both ways. And I've seen this work much better from a customer service perspective when we consolidate and we put resources in offices that can respond appropriately. So that's one of the things that we are definitely considering doing. My phone rang, so it threw me off a little bit. Sorry about that. The other thing I think we need to look at is if we consolidate offices, we need to look at how many buses are running out of each office and make sure our resources are allocated based on the number of buses that are being operated. Because I think we want to make sure that the small offices have adequate resources. We may not combine every office because it may not make sense from a logistical perspective and geographic perspective to do that. So we'll take a look at all the offices and see. We've got a couple of areas we're interested in, but I did want to just kind of let you know what we're thinking and why we're doing. I always like to provide a why behind what we're doing because most of the time, if people don't know why, they make up their own why. Sometimes that's not positive. So we want to be sure that people are aware of what we're doing and why we're thinking in those terms. We really want to increase our service. We heard that loud and clear from our principals. And so we think that by combining some of our office locations, we'll be able to achieve that goal. So I'll stop there and ask if you have any questions about things that we're doing or things that we're thinking about.
I was curious about how you identified, just if you could give me a couple of ideas on criteria of how 14 buses were identified to be parked.
Okay, so what we look at for double runs is we look at the neighborhoods around schools that are closest because we don't want children waiting out to school for long periods of time. We don't want administration and teachers having to wait with students for a long period of time. The target we have for wait times is no more than 15 to 20 minutes after school when a bus runs. And you have to have that work in the morning as well because you're going to be dropping off about 30 minutes prior to bell time. So you want to use that bus to go back out from campus and pick up a second load and bring that load back in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have a complete load of students. So for example, capacity on a bus for elementary students might be 72 passengers. It doesn't mean you'll go back out and get 72 passengers. You might. But you might go back out and get 25 or 30. It all depends on how close that run is to school. And so we want it logistically to work to make sure we can actually it works well and that we don't have delays that are created by a bus going back out in the morning or afternoon. So what we did was we looked around each school. Most of the schools that have doubles will be urbanized type areas. So your country type areas or your rural areas won't have the opportunity to run doubles at all, probably, or very much at all, because there just aren't the population density. It doesn't exist out there in those areas. So there'll be some areas that are more affected than others. We don't plan more, I think, than maybe 2 doubles per school. Or at this point, we do have a couple in reserve in case we have in case the bus driver shortage is exacerbated. by the COVID-19 situation. So basically they're designed to be around campuses and very quick to run to and from neighborhoods right around campus. And by identifying those areas, we were able to reduce the number of buses we're running at those schools and identify then 14 buses system-wide that would be parked as a result of that strategy. Does that make sense?
Was it primarily one, a couple of clusters, or was it spread out across the county, those 14 buses, or was it, in a couple of different areas like Piedmont or Parkwood?
Yeah, if you take a line and draw it down the map through Union County, right through Monroe, and go west of central Monroe and western Monroe are the areas that are most affected. That more highly populated areas. The eastern part of the county, there might be one double out there that we can do, one or two. That would be about it. And I don't think any school would have more than one out in those areas. And that would again be just because they might have a town that has a neighborhood that's real close by the school. But primarily everything is from Monroe west.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
As far as the process mapping that you're doing, is that like true end-to-end processing, or are you just looking at documenting like standard operating procedures, or what does that look like?
It is standard operating procedure. The actual transportation director who was here before had started that project, and he probably got a third of the way through that project, and I noticed immediately that he'd been doing some work in those areas, and so we went back to a lot of the notebooks we had from the past on memos that were written to staff and things that were put in place from an operations perspective. And we tried to standardize the look a little bit of how we roll out that information to our staff and to make sure that all areas are doing things the same way. So it's really more of a standard operating procedure review to make sure we are operating in the way we want to operate in. And we've actually reviewed that with of course, internal staff here, and we're covering it with our specialists to make sure that everything's going to be standardized when we go back to school. I mean, there's never 100% of anything standardized perfect so that everybody does everything exactly the same way every day. But we're really looking to increase that percentage closer to 100% as much as possible. The bus driver packet that goes out should all be the same. It should all have the same materials in it when it goes out. The way we respond to field trips and handle assignment of field trips for drivers, and everything from how we handle payroll to field trips to you name it, charter buses, the whole list of things. We reviewed those procedures to make sure that they feel sound, that we can all agree upon the best way to handle things, and are very excited about that review. And we'll have that on a Google Doc so that it is accessible for our staff at any time. So we're very excited about that.
Great. And then as far as your org goes, you're talking about the 8 different divisions right now with 3 people in each division, and you're looking to consolidate. Can we get kind of like a before and after of what your vision looks like from an org structure, showing the offices and what you're looking to consolidate, and how you'll get more individuals in each one of the divisions, so you're able to provide the quick customer service and always someone there to answer questions?
Yeah, so I've got a map on my wall of my office, and so when I look at the map, it helps me think through it a little bit better. So each of the 8 offices currently has a number of buses assigned to that office. We run 289 buses, I believe it is right now. So we would take the number of staff available that we have by 289, and that would give us a fraction. And then we'd apply that to each individual area to find out how many staff really should be out there based on the number of buses that you're running. And the other thing I didn't mention, I don't think, is that I want to make sure we're actually getting TIMs out in the field. We have TIMs centralized, right? TIMs being our routing system personnel is centralized. And my experience with that has been that a centralized TIMs organization can't respond as quickly and as efficiently to routing concerns that the bus driver walks in with an office and says, hey, I can't turn right on this road because there's a stoplight there that prevents me from going right, or I have to turn left, or there are different things that happen out on the road that you can't turn left at a certain place, can't go right at a certain place during a certain time of day. And so we have to fix those routing issues, and that has to come into a centralized routing process that allows our 4 routing techs to be able to go in and make those changes. I believe we need more people in routing. And that doesn't mean that everybody knows everything about routing, but it does mean that the most common things that happen are farmed out to the division level office so that they can perform those things very quickly. Assigning a student, for example, to a route. If it's an easy way to assign a student, which there is, called quick assign, to the closest stop, then that's not something that should take a number of days. It's something that should be done almost immediately. So what I want to do is expand that out to our area offices so that they have some input to the TIMS process, and it shortens the amount of time it takes our processors to get people added to their routes. So that's another piece of determining how many people need to be in the office. And we're not asking for additional resources. We're going to use what we have. We're going to spread out the resources we have and hopefully make them more effective. So having said that, we're sort of looking as well. Now, I want to say this the right way to you all. We have to evaluate our staff and make sure that the staff we have out there is doing the work that's going to get us where we want to go. And so I don't want to combine too quickly before we have a chance to assess the staff and make sure that they're doing the work they need to be doing. It's more geographic based, but it also has a flavor of staff involved. So would you combine a Cuthbertson and Marvin Ridge, or a part? So Cuthbertson and Parkwood are already combined. Would you combine a Marvin Ridge in that, or would you combine Marvin Ridge Weddington? We're still kind of working on those details to see what the best combination looks like. And we want to have a strong team in each location. So there are two primary factors to it. You can't leave out staff. You have to consider the staff strength that you have, along with what makes good sense geographically. So we'll be looking at both of those things to make sure that when we make the consolidation, that we have a good, strong team in place and that it fits the geographic nature of what we're trying to get done. So currently we're looking at Monroe Sun Valley because they'll be moving to a new facility on Gold Mine Road. We're looking at Cuthbertson, Parkwood, and Marvin Ridge. They would have roughly about 60 buses in that cluster. Weddington already has almost 40, so that would be kind of a good combination because Weddington will be a standalone then because they have 40 buses alone. Maybe Porter Ridge and Piedmont, we're not exactly sure about that one. They're relatively close together distance-wise, so we might be able to combine those two. Forest Hills is actually kind of by itself, and then Parkwood down south will be by itself. So we're not exactly sure yet of the combinations. We are pretty comfortable with Monroe Sun Valley because they'll be in the same facility anyway. So the plan is to sort of go ahead and put them together immediately once we move into the facility, watch that work for a short period of time, and then decide if we want to go ahead and move maybe Parkwood, Cuthbertson, and Marvin Ridge together. Will be the second evaluation we do. Whether that happens before school starts or not, I've just not gotten that far in my mind quite yet.
Great. No, I appreciate that update. It's great to hear.
Quick question real fast too. Do you have any other experience with any other routing software, or how's your comfortability with TIMS?
I've never been a big fan of TIMS, but it's what the state provides. I know that there are a couple of LEAs, or at least one, National Rocky Mountain uses the routing software provided by Synovia, and that is allegedly it's supposed to be much easier to use, but we would have to pay for that if we decided to go with that type of arrangement. The state provides TIMS at no cost to us, so that's always been the knock on trying to go to a different routing software is you got to pay for it. National Rocky Mountain would tell you it's the best they've never ever done, but it's not taking hold. That move was probably made, I'm gonna say 5 years ago or more, and the other LEAs in the state have not jumped ship, so to speak, to go to a different routing software. Although we tend to get the leftovers kind of from TIMS. It's not always the most updated software for us because we are getting a kind of a free version of it, or DPI pays a much discounted rate for it. So we don't always have the most up-to-date features, which makes routing a little bit more of a challenge in my mind. But we've made it work over the years, and I'm certainly open to looking at other software packages, but the holdback has always been cost.
Okay, thank you.
With your limited time in office, are you able to kind of give us a full assessment? Do you have the tools that are needed right now to be effective?
I really would love to see. I'd love to see the operation working. I'm at a disadvantage in that because I've not seen it working. I guess being old, it is an advantage to have experience too, right? And my consulting work allowed me to see a lot of different LEAs. I was probably in 15 different LEAs over the past 4 or 5 years, more so in the last 18 months because I was obviously doing that, not full time, but we're working a lot in the consulting area. And course, most areas in North Carolina are using TIMS. They're using, that routing software. I think listen, we're not broken. Union County Public Schools is not a broken transportation organization. Can we tweak some things and make it stronger? Absolutely. And that's what I want to do. I want to get this to where in my time here, and I've kind of decided I want to stay a little bit longer than maybe our original plan was coming in, because I tell you, you got a fantastic district. I was telling Mark the other day, when you talk to people here, it's almost like you've been knowing them all your life, and you talk to them for the first time, and they're more than willing to help. They want this to be good. They're willing to help you get where you want to go and participate in things you want to do. So that's great. I feel really strong about the team that's here. That said, we do have some work to do. We want to address the issues that the principals brought up about service and us getting strong with our service. Our bus driver shortage, which obviously I didn't mention one other strategy for addressing the bus driver shortage, and that is a look at bell times. My understanding is we looked at bell times a little bit, 3 years ago. I actually did change bell times in Berkeley County, South Carolina, about a district about the same size as what we are here. I changed, worked with Stanley County Schools next door last summer to change their bell schedules. We parked about 25% of their buses as a result of that project. But it takes an appetite from a lot of people, board members being the leaders in that, to want to tackle that project. So it's probably a year-long project. It involves principals, and involves community, of course, board members, and we have to have an appetite for making those changes. Part of our problem right now, just in my view, is that we've got some of our longest routes in the middle of our operating cycle. The high schools are right smack dab in the middle, and those routes are going to be the longest because their feeder patterns, their borders are the biggest, right? So it's going to take more time to transport those students, and so that means you can't use your buses effectively on one end or the other when you're running those routes. And so I think looking at that over time and us deciding, is that something we want to tackle, is certainly something we got to discuss over time. We knew that the double runs was a much faster way to have an immediate impact on our bus driver shortage. And so that's why we chose to go with double routing versus suggesting a change in bell times at this point in time, if we know that's going to be a long range project. So do we have the resources we need? Yeah, I mean, I think we do. I think we're well staffed for the most part. We've got to allocate those resources in a way I think it will make us most effective. But I do feel good about where we are, and I feel good about a lot of our staff. So just really want to get to running some things so we can work out some of the kinks and see where those really lie.
Great, thank you. As far as transportation update, any other questions for Mr. Dent?
No.
I have none.
Okay. Looks like we also have contracted transportation contract presentation or review. Is Mr. Denton, are you giving that?
Yes. So we are recommending a renewal of assistance travel and transport for our contract transportation vendor. I had personal experience with the owner of this business and my prior employer as well. He did a fantastic job. The contract, as was originally written, allows us to renew that contract for 4 additional 1-year periods. And so my recommendation is we do renew that contract. I think we had one other contractor that was also on board with us. That contract is terminated. I suspect, and I had experience with that contractor as well, it was lack of performance that actually terminated the contract with that vendor. And we're not recommending renewal with that vendor at this time. So we are recommending renewal. For those of you that don't really know too much about contract, I'll give you a brief overview of what contract transportation does. It provides our services that are related to homeless children and or EC children and specialized programs. A lot of times school buses aren't really designed to go pick up 1 or 2 kids in different locations. And of course, our homeless population represents particularly that. So it's much more efficient, much more cost effective to allow a contractor to run that run for us. And so that's why I think the recommendation was made to go to contractor in the beginning. I think we need to look not only at contractor, but parent contract as well for the upcoming school year, because we know there's going to be a lot of perhaps increased volume of students that are spread out, in particular, maybe our EC kids, because they may or may not be able to ride on a school bus with those students, particularly if they haven't compromised the immune system. So our contractor, while we know one of our programs is ending and he was providing support for that program, could be utilized as fully as he was this past year, and maybe even more so depending on what that looks like for the upcoming school year. So we don't know yet what it looks like. We would use it to supplement our yellow bus operation and to make our yellow bus operation more efficient as well. So if we're running a yellow bus of very long distance for 1 or 2 kids, that's the optimum way to use a contractor, because that reduces our costs it reduces substantially to do that. So with that, we do recommend renewal of the contract, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Scott, so this contract basically is asking for a 7.25% increase. And from what I understood, it was primarily because an additional person is needed on the van for IEPs.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. When we transport students that have IEPs, most of the IEPs require an additional person because of the disability that student may have. And so we didn't know at the time that the contract was signed a year ago that we'd be transporting quite as many EC students as we did. And so the contractor absorbed that cost last year, but wanted to let us know that he needed to up the contract amount this year for anticipated same level of service provided to some of his EC students. He'd have to increase our cost to be able to provide those additional personnel from his perspective to make sure that we met the terms of the IEP.
So with gas prices and everything being at an all-time low and everything, do you think a 7.25% increase is fair, or should it be more around 3 or 4% increase? How did they arrive at 7.25?
I think that the cost of any operation is based more on personnel costs than it is on fuel costs. Fuel costs is obviously a controversial issue right now, because as you remember, back when fuel was $3 or $4 a gallon, and folks were passing along, cost increases to us for fuel increases. I'm not sure we ever recovered that and got that back, because it kind of falls into whatever rate they were charging at the time. But I think based on what I've seen so far, this vendor is a very, very good, honest vendor. And I think what he did was looked at his cost from a perspective of current cost of fuel and what his, and you can't really go, of course, fuel right now is the lowest it's been, and I can't even remember when.
Right.
But there's no guarantee it'll remain that way. He's got to sort of hedge his cost a little bit too. I know he's not using the current cost and projecting that for the entire year. He's probably going more on an average cost that he's experienced over time and passing that along as well. So I feel comfortable with the price increase based on the knowledge of him providing that additional personnel, because that personnel cost is the largest cost that a business operates with.
Well, and it's our school district's largest cost as well. I was just wondering how comfortable you felt with a 7.25% increase. The other question I have is looking at, was last year our first year using this vendor, 1920?
To my knowledge, yes, because the contract was signed, the initial term began 1920. It could have been used prior to then, but I'm just not familiar with that if it was. So
based off last year, do you have, are you able to tell us what percent ridership was McKinney-Vento, EC, and IB?
I don't have that information with me right now. We can certainly get that. I know Mandy probably has that because she keeps very detailed records on who we're transporting. So certainly we can send you the information, but I don't have it with me right now.
The reason I ask is because obviously McKinney-Vento, that's a no-brainer. We want to and have to transport those students. But the board made a decision not to transport just because of redirects that we had to identify in our 2020-21 budget that we just sent to the county, that we could no longer afford to spend $4,000 per rider just to transport out a cluster to the IB program. So I was really curious what percentage of this contract compared to McKinney, Vento, and EC was actually IB.
I see. Again, we can get that information for you. I don't have it in front of me right now, but we can certainly get that for you.
Because IB should not be on here on this contract.
Miss Merrill, they, and to make sure I had my microphone right. Last year, we transported a total of 10, if you're talking just the vans, and this was back in January, February, March. We transported 10 IB students as a part of this contract, and there were 5 McKinney Vento students and 7 EC students. Keep in mind that changes on a weekly, if not daily basis for the McKinney Vento and EC children.
So for $150,000 last year, not including the increase that is being discussed today, most of the students that were being transported were to the IB program. 1075.
Yes, that's correct.
So is it fair to say that this contract could potentially be cut in half by eliminating IB transportation?
So we do expect a significant decrease in it. At the same time, what Scott said earlier, keep in mind, was that we may also look for other opportunities to provide better service to those McKinney Vento and EC children. And so if we go up there, we should likely see a reduction in the yellow bus cost.
We just want you to think that that by next year, you see the same amount we spent this year or projected to spend this year, and be surprised that number didn't go down, because we would be leveraging the use of the contractor against some yellow bus service, so that we could maximize our use of yellow buses. And it may be we can run fewer yellow buses by maximizing the contractor, which oftentimes is a much more cost-effective way to provide the service.
I just want to reiterate, if this contract is McKinney Vento and EC, then I understand, but the board just spent 3 months working on our budget, and IB was a redirect. So just speaking for myself, I would not be able to support this contract if it included IB, because that is a recommendation that came from the superintendent when we were trying to trim our budget. And the board supported that this transporting 10 students basically with a chauffeur on a daily 180 days a week is not something we can afford. Unfortunately, we just can't afford to do that. $4,000 per student. So if we spend approximately $8,600 per student, but because they're IB, we're going to spend an additional $4,000 per student. $13,000 or $14,000 per student just really is not in our budget.
So keep in mind as well that this is a usage contract, and we only pay for the trips that we make. If we had a fewer number of EC or McKinney Vento, we would spend less money.
And likewise on that, if we're not transporting IB students, we're not contracting for that particular service. It's contracting for services, but we only pay for what we utilize. So if IB students are not being transported, then they are not part of this contract.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks for that clarity. Any other questions for Mr. Denton or Mr. Strickland on transportation? I believe we're going to be looking for, I'll entertain a motion to recommend AT&T, their contract, to go to the full board for approval for the June meeting. Are there any other questions? Okay. Any other questions? Well, do I have a second?
Second.
So I just want to confirm, is IB transportation in this contract, or because last year we set aside $100,000 for IB students because we were told we had, 40 plus students that were going to be riding a bus. And then
Yeah.
after school started, we found out they were riding a personalized transport system, individualized. So,
Yeah, I believe this is a service that supplements the yellow bus service that we provide. If we are not transporting IB students, then this would not be, it is a service that they could provide because they are the supplemental service to the yellow buses. But if the decision has been made that IB students will not be transported to Marvin Ridge from their cluster, then that would not be part of the costs that this company would get.
Somehow or another, a decision was made last year after we approved $100,000 for bus transportation. We set aside $100,000 in the budget to transport IB. And then after school got started, we started using the service. So my comfort level is a little confused on how to support this, because when school starts back again, or, is there going to be a decision, oh, well, let's just use AT&T for the IB students?
That will not happen. We will not transport students to the IB program, either using Yellow Bus or the transportation service.
So, Ms. McLam, is there some kind of control that we can put in place from a visibility standpoint, like some type of a per month allocation for spending? And if we start going over and above that, we have, the board is notified as to the rationale. Again, being, with the budget being so tight, we're looking for some controls around this.
And again, Joe, I just want to impress, this is a budget issue. Funding this coming year. And matter of fact, let's just go ahead and get on the table. Our budget request has not been approved by the county. We don't even know that we're going to get what we asked for. And our redirects, I think, were around $1.3 million. And since they haven't approved it, they may come back and ask us to cut more out of our budget, which would exceed this decision, which was a hard decision. But if you can assure me that this is for McKinney-Vento and EC, and you talk about what a reputable company this is, I can support that, as long as we don't bust our budget again and start using this service for something that the board did not approve.
Well, and what I also heard is this could be a supplement to a yellow bus where it's needed, right? Where it financially makes sense.
Well, and that's how they made the decision to start transporting IB last year.
So I guess I go back to Ms. McLam, with the budget being as tight as it is, how do we get controls on this and show that, the usage of this company and the services they provide is affecting the bottom line in a positive manner to the budget, as opposed to negatively impacting and increasing costs?
I mean, we can work together. They can do a monthly not to exceed type purchase order. The contract would be in place as a not to exceed as well, so that we can monitor on a monthly basis how much we're using. But it's really going to be very dependent on who they assign them to go pick up. They're not going to be able to go pick up a student or even know to pick someone up unless transportation gives them that, that address or that information. So I think that they've got the controls in place to be able to monitor the students that are transporting, but we can definitely put, a monthly not to exceed to try to monitor and keep the costs as low as possible.
So the cover letter to this contract was for McKinney-Vento, EC, and IB. So if we can agree that we will use this vendor for McKinney-Vento and EC, and I see everyone nodding their head, that we're not going to come back to a SPIT committee six months from now, and we're transporting 10 to 20 IB students with personalized chauffeurs every day.
Ms. Merrill, the reason the document reads as it is, when we put it together, the redirects weren't in place. They had not been approved yet, or they'd not been vetted by the board. So we looked at the total picture of what we saw at the time. But moving forward with the direction that the board is now given, you're correct. We will not be transporting any IB students.
Thank you.
So this just has a cap of 150K for McKinney-Vento and IB, or not IB, but other areas as needed, right?
And to clarify, this contract is for 161,000.
161.
And that's based off of our anticipated usage from last year. If something changes, if we get a plethora of additional EC students or McKinney-Vento students, we'll certainly bring it back to the SPIT committee and update you all.
Right. Okay. So there may be a possibility that you would come back and need more than 161.
Depending on IEPs and what we're required to transport. Again, the McKinney-Vento and the EC populations they change every week.
So do we not get any state or federal funding to help transport that student population? So I assume this is coming out of local dollars?
Our funding is provided via block grant from the state, and whatever costs exceed that block grant comes out of local funding. We don't get any federal funds to transport to and from school. If there are midday programs and that sort of thing, then that supplement comes from the EC department, and they're billed accordingly. So we get funds to only operate to and from school yellow bus from the state.
Thank you very much.
Again, just for clarity, this is a service is needed to supplement the yellow bus program, and AT&T is the vendor that we are choosing to provide that service. So if this were not to be approved and recommended to the board, you would have to find another vendor to provide that service, because it could not be all handled with the yellow buses, correct?
That is correct, and it is a critical part of balancing yellow bus usage. Yellow buses simply can't go and run routes for 1 and 2 students that live in different areas, homeless and EC primarily, that attend programs that are way across the county in another direction. But yellow bus can't get to the next route on time. That's why the contractor is necessary, because we simply can't perform many of those runs with yellow buses.
Do you know what percentage last year was out of county, if any?
Mark, I don't know if you know. I don't have that number. No.
I don't know. I remember conversations of having to go to Mecklenburg County. We may have, for a homeless student, have gone to somewhere in South Carolina. We may have gone to Anson County. I know that we do it. I don't have the numbers right now.
Okay, thank you. That's good enough.
Okay, so for AT&T's contract, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of recommending this to the full board, please say aye.
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 All those not in favor, please say nay. Okay, so do I have, and I am an aye as well. So, Mr. Kecker, I don't know that I heard your vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said aye. I said
Okay. All right. So it passes 4-0. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation on transportation. Moving on to the next agenda item is the 2020-2021 calendar. Dr. Bulla?
Yes, good morning, guys. How you doing? Thanks for your time this morning and for all you do for our school system. In the board docs, I've provided 3 calendar updates. This is in response to Senate Bill 704, which gave us some latitude to change General Statute 115C 82.2, which is the calendar law. So on August 20th, we convened the calendar committee because Senate Bill 704 had a couple of stipulations that we were required to incorporate within our local calendars, but one of which being starting school on August 17th. Another one is to include remote learning days in the calendar, and then to ensure that the teachers have 215 days. Also, the days of instruction was increased within this Senate bill, and I wanted the team to know that we tried hard to honor the original calendar work for next calendar year. We had a few built-in challenges as it stood or as it stands with the Republican National Convention, as well as this is an election year, so we needed to make sure we had a work day on election day, as it's a presidential election. So we have 3 calendars in our district. We have a traditional calendar, we have a calendar for Union County Early College, and we also have a calendar for Wolf School. So I have the 3 calendar drafts for you, and wanted to just kind of take questions if we have questions, and just take a minute to discuss the changes that we made.
So if for some reason the National Convention was no longer going to be held in Charlotte, I hear that there's, a buzz out there with the governor not opening things up quick enough, and perhaps other cities would be entertained to host. How flexible is this? So that second week, with it being, teacher work days and then remote learning days, how much flexibility do we have in that to make that, to turn that back to just a regular week in the calendar?
I think that we would obviously have to revisit that. The new stipulations include we have to have those remote learning days. So, and it's stated that those days cannot occur prior to the 24th. So if it were to be canceled, we still need to honor the remote learning days, which are what we're doing now, but which in my opinion would be sort of the trade out for if it were canceled.
I think the bottom line is also that we would have to make another modification to the calendar and come back to this committee and the full board for another approval. I mean, whenever that would be. So we'd have to make that change and have the Board of Education approve any changes that we have if the RNC is canceled.
Okay, but I think what I'm hearing as well is we need those days, and we could perhaps, even if the convention is not in town, we could still entertain this calendar.
Yes, we could. We could keep the calendar in place, or we could come back, and if we wanted to not have that week off, we could come back and change that as well. It would totally be up to the board in terms of your approval.
Okay.
So with the traditional calendar, we basically have changed it to where the original start date is now the 17th. And we also included some opportunities for teacher work days to happen prior to that. And we tried to leave most of the work that was approved back in the fall as is, and we added the remote learning days, and we changed just a tad towards the end of the year. So there basically were some shifts made to the traditional calendar to accommodate mostly the new start date and making sure that the teachers work their 215 days. With the early college schedule, that too is the option that we have come up with that most closely aligns with the traditional calendar. So when normal breaks in the calendar occur, to the best that we can overlay traditional calendar with the early college calendar, that is the option that's presented before you. And with the with Wolf School is on what is most easily defined as a year-round schedule. And we have that calendar draft before you. We are still exploring a waiver to make sure that, because their early start date is it's early July, and we just want to make sure that those students that come to Wolf with our phased in, making sure that all students are safe. We just want to make sure that that calendar is not too early. So we're kind of exploring some waivers to see if that date needs to be shifted out, if that calendar could stand as is, assuming that all students are safe in returning to school.
To further elaborate on what Dr. Bulla is saying, I think one of our concerns is with Wolf starting in July on the traditional year-round calendar. First of all, we've gotten a lot of feedback from staff and parents there. It's my understanding that they prefer that kind of schedule because it allows for flexibility and allows for medical appointments and those kinds of things during the intersession breaks. And it just really works well for that community. One of the concerns that we have is kind of the coming back to a face-to-face environment in the middle of July, still, exploring protocols and health and safety measures, that there is perhaps some concern about that reality. And so one of the things that the legislature has required is, as Dr. Bulla mentioned, is we can't start remote learning prior to August the 24th. And so, coming back to a face-to-face environment, if that is not possible in July, can we seek a waiver for that legislative requirement to start those students via remote learning in July? If that waiver is not approved, we'd have to come back to the board with a different calendar option. And so that's kind of one of the things that we're exploring right now, is to figure out, can we start our Wolf School year-round calendar and keep it the same way it is? And if we cannot go back into face-to-face at that point in time in July, can we seek a waiver for instructional purposes to begin remote learning? So that's a little bit about what the waiver ask is. And if that waiver is denied, our recommendation will have to be back to the SPIT committee, perhaps in June, with just another discussion about Wolf School. So I hope that helps explain kind of what we're thinking about with the Wolf School calendar.
Thank you. I do have a question on the traditional calendar. So with the earlier start, when would the semester end? Would the semester end before our holiday break in December, or does it still go into January?
It still goes into January.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Joe.
And I was just going to say that is something that between now and Tuesday, I would like to do some further research, Dr. Bulla. I noticed that last night CMS approved their calendar, and they are doing basically the same thing that we are, but their semester is ending before the winter break, and students are taking their semester exams, and this might be a great opportunity for us to try to do the same. I know that's been something that during the last, however many years, our teachers have really, and students and families have expressed that as a desire. So I kind of wanted to ask why we can't do the same, and or if we don't know the answer, can we do the research between now and Tuesday to figure out how to make that a possibility, if at all possible?
And I agree 100% with what you just said, Dr. Houlihan. That was my main question with the calendar. You know, that's something that you've heard discussed for years with people's concerns dealing with that. And also the fact that, you know, you add into it that you would be coming back after Memorial Day for 2 more exams. And you know, it looks like something, maybe this is a great opportunity to correct that.
I will definitely take the lead in exploring those options. That is something that, you know, it has been discussed and comes up every calendar committee year. Unfortunately, the reality of it is with the General Statute 115C 82.2 in the calendar law is quite rigid in what we can do with regards to start dates and end dates. And typically those bookend dates provide a challenge for that. Having said that, we're be more than happy to explore those options so we can avoid what I call a lopsided semester, because what we would try to avoid with high school scheduling particularly is first semester being fewer days than second semester, and they're not equal. And so that would be just you know, I'll be more than happy to explore those options and report back based on CMS's decision.
But they do allow creativity in there, though. That's not something, I know it's rigid, but there is some creativity where we could move some days around, and it's a possibility. I know that's feasible, but
it absolutely is a possibility, and I will work with the committee and others to try to come up with, you know, some options to accommodate that request.
I think Tom brings up a good point. In the fall semester, we'll just use Math 1 as an example, or Math 3. Those are so critical. You would not want to short those students where they don't have enough instructional days to truly be prepared for their final exam, simply because we had fewer instructional days in the fall and more instructional days in the spring semester. You know, it's a very tricky balance, I think. So I definitely see the challenge. As far as the 2 exams in May, having, you know, 2 before Memorial Day and 2 after Memorial Day, as a parent of 2 teenagers that have gone through the system, I personally don't have a problem with that, because the holiday weekend just gives them more time to prepare and study for their last 2 exams. So that doesn't concern me as much, but that's just one parent's opinion.
Okay, so I know we are looking to have a motion to recommend these calendars to the full board. With the traditional calendar still, you know, looking at options, are we at a point where we still want to do this? And, you know, we just be looking for some revisions? How do we want to move with that?
So my recommendation would be to ask the committee to approve it to the full board. If we don't have to put it on consent. We can leave it as a standalone if you want other discussion, you know, to figure out what research we can do. I think the biggest change is we're required by law to make the start date August 17th. And that's the biggest thing, that local school boards are required to make that change. And so I feel like because of timing, we need to go ahead and do that. What happens in between, we can research that between now and Tuesday and be prepared to speak to it at the board meeting on Tuesday if we are able to modify the traditional calendar with regards to exam dates, if that is allowable.
I would agree with that.
So I do have another question, Mr. Parker. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Sorry about that. But with remote learning being the second week of school, how confident are we that we can get devices out? Everything will be implemented to allow that to happen.
Sean and I have been working on contracts with getting these devices. So it's just, I think now we've negotiated our best price and we got a great service. It's just now how quickly can we order them? The longer we wait, the harder that'll be to order. because there's such a demand with remote learning with all K-12 school districts, and it's just supply and demand now. So if we can get our ordering within the next few weeks, we can guarantee we can have them ready by August 17th. If we delay because of financing and we're trying to get the best finance rates and we're trying to adjust our monthly costs, you know, the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to get them in. But if nothing else happens, we have devices for students when they return. Those older grade 3 through 5 Chromebooks, they're fragile. They're not really intended to go home because of an unsupervised environment and the age of these devices. They're not conducive for home learning. I guess in our worst case, we could use them if all else, if we don't get them quick enough. But our whole goal, and Sean and I are working as hard as we can to get these in and get them into our district before the 17th of August.
So let's assume that everything goes well, we have the devices. How confident are you that we can get them rolled out and students and staff will be prepared?
Yeah, with part of the contract negotiation, I asked the vendor to do the white glove service, which is basically putting the cases on them, putting asset tags, going ahead and rolling them in our Google Suite and palletizing them by school. So I have no issues at all at getting them to the school and getting these distributions completed on time. And part of that is we met with the elementary principals to give them proposals on how to perform this quickly. And one of them is 2 weeks before school starts, we want to go ahead and pre-check out devices to students, go ahead and put forms on them for the students to fill out so that the first day of school, if a student walks into a classroom, there's a form there for them to fill out, the Chromebook acceptance form. When that's signed, the device already has their name on it, already checked out, they're ready to carry it the next day. So we'll be staged day 2 for kids to carry them home based on the return forms from parents.
Jay, I almost wonder if that form can be sitting on the student's desk at open house. If we're able to have an open house, I know that's very questionable, but parents are typically very eager to find out who their teachers are in the elementary grades, and you might even be able to get those signatures before school starts.
That's a great idea, Ms. Merrill, and yes, they're available. The forms are completed now. We've already made all our adjustments, and we can have them available to schools and ready at any open house or before school starts. They can have copies, and you're able to actually put these on the school websites where parents, if they do choose, could download them, print them, sign them, and bring them to the open house. If they have those resources, they could do that. But we'll have printed sheets and have them available at the open houses if we're able to have those.
And if we're not able to have open house, parents could go ahead and print it out and send it in on the first day too. And I think it's worth mentioning that your team did decide, considering the pandemic that we're in right now, that we are not going to collect middle school devices at the end of June like we normally do. Your team decided to go ahead and let all of our middle school students keep their device over the summer, so they can continue working or reading Mayan or whatever through the summer, and so they will have their device on day 1 when we come back.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Grades 6 to 11 will keep their devices over the summertime. They'll extend learning and allow access during the summer period, and they can bring them back the first day. The only ones we'll collect are the seniors or those students that are not returning to Union County Public Schools in the fall.
I think that was a good call.
Okay, great. Any other questions? All right, I will entertain a motion to recommend the 3 calendars to the full board for the June meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, 4-0. All right, moving on, let's see. So just as far as closing goes, we have the two motions that we voted 4-0 on to take to the full board. The approval of AT&T, or the recommendation of AT&T as the provider for contracted transportation, and the 3 proposed calendars. Michelle, do we have a next meeting date?
I'm sorry, I have to unmute myself. We do. Let's see. June 24th at 7:30 a.m.
Okay, very good. Appreciate that. All right. Next, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.